Welcome to the Northeast Divide podcast. I'm your host, John Lane. I'm here with Anth, as I always am, and we're going to talk about the two biggest clubs in the Northeast, Newcastle United and Sunderland. We are sponsored by Mama Lane Crafts. They are offering a 10% discount if you mention the Northeast Divide in your order. The link to their Etsy store and their socials is in the description of this podcast and this YouTube video, so do check it out. Anth, right, he's taking a piss now, right? 4 league games. No defeats, 1 goal conceded, which was an own goal, right? So no one's actually scored a goal against you yet. This isn't Sunderland.
It's magnificent. And do you know what as well? Is Alan Shearer a Mackem? Is Alan Shearer a Mackem? Because he was in amongst us, wasn't he, at the weekend? He was in amongst us.
Oh, I was totally going to bring this up. So for those who haven't seen the story, Anth, do you want to give a bit of an overview of what happened to Alan Shearer this weekend?
Well, he's gone out to a wedding, hasn't he, in Italy apparently, and he's struggled with a flight sort of when he's returned to UK shores, and apparently he's got in touch with a friend, and they put him in contact with someone at LNER. What a fantastic railway that is, organisation, blah blah, and they've gone, yeah, we can get you on the train. Don't know if we can guarantee you a seat, but we'll get you on. Actually, yes, we can guarantee you a seat. And then he got on the train, and let's just say he kept a dignified silence for the entire journey back to the Northeast, didn't he, John?
So he's if you've, I don't know, you may have seen this on social media, but on the Rest is Football podcast, Alan Shearer spoke about this with Gary Lineker and Mika Richards, and basically he ended up on a carriage on the train, and what he said is he sat and he put his cap on and he had his head down because he realised there were going to be loads of Sunderland fans joining him, because obviously they were travelling back up to Newcastle, because you can't really get the train to Sunderland and you get it to Newcastle and then you have to get a change, but that's another story. And he said that he said he was sat there really quietly, and then the Newcastle song started, and then the Alan Shearer song started, and there's a couple of pretty cutting anti-Shearer songs that someone sing, and he sat through it, and he said he didn't get recognised at all on the entire journey, the 4 hours or whatever that he was on that train for. And he said he was really worried. He said he was hoping they'd all go off in Durham. He said half got off at Durham. There was still a fair whack that got off at Newcastle Station. And he just had to sit there quietly, but he did send a message, and he basically said, so those of you that were on the 7:30 from King's Cross to Newcastle in carriage C, fuck you.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, I thought it was a fantastic story. But let's get back to, rather than talking about legendary goal scorers and everything else, which I'd love to sit here and talk about all day. Tell us about this start of the season, mate, because this is mad, absolutely mad.
Fratton Park is not a good place to visit at the best of times, and I mean, the faithful supporters made the journey down there, and I mean, I was going to go for a no frills 1-0 very tight win, and I thought it would be a really dire game to watch, to be perfectly honest with you, because Portsmouth are a bit of a, I don't know, like I said the other week, an unknown quantity. I mean, they're doing okay, so it's difficult when you come from League One, but the performance that we put in, just again, just so professional, well drilled, well organised. Lebris, I don't know what, like I say, what he's telling them on the training ground, but it's work, and the high press game, the intensity. The interesting thing is, though, apparently that they've done some stats with regards to possession, and apparently, I mean, we ranked 10th for possession, one in the final third of the pitch. So, I mean, they're saying he's implementing an aggressive approach, and obviously it's to protect against fatigue because it's a long campaign, etc. And yeah, so I mean, again, in the entire EFL, we're the only team with 100% record, and our goal difference of +9 is also the best across all 3 divisions. I mean, like you say, two own goals, unfortunate. But Brown, I mean, played very, very well. I think Dan Neil he'll not struggle because I think he's a shoe-in. But I mean, I think Brown's made it hard for him now to get his place back after his suspension. And I mean, Mundell again with another wonderful counter-attacking goal. But again, a special mention to Mienda. I mean, he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal. He was big. He was strong. He ran the channels. He held everything up. He got 2 assists. And I just think, he's wearing that jersey now, and he's fully deserved of it. He is our main man in attack now. So yeah, and he's proven all the doubters wrong. So what a fantastic win, and another really disciplined, well organised performance.
I have to hand it to you. He's started the season really well, and I've only really watched one game that he's have played, and that was it Sheffield Wednesday at home I watched, and yeah, like there was no competition there. You were easily the better side. You took your chances. They never looked like they were getting into the game, and you know it takes something, and I think this is the thing. I think we talked about the unity at the start of the season and how it felt like the club was more united and more kind of positive, and this is what positive, like, kind of vibes can do. Now, if I think about kind of when Newcastle did what we did and finished in the top 4, that was a club united from top to bottom. For the first time that I can remember in my lifetime, that was the case, because I think even in the Robson era, even in the Keegan era, there was issues at boardroom level, like real issues, and like you got Shepherd and Hall calling fans all sorts of things that I
Mm.
won't repeat, but all that kind of stuff. And so to be in a situation that you're in now, where actually I think people have just, I think you kind of said it. There was almost like a realistic but optimistic kind of outlook on this season. A manager that's unknown to most in this country, and I think the other thing to say about Regis Lebris is there was lots of people saying, "Oh well, he got his last club relegated and all this kind of thing," and people don't
Mm.
kind of realise that actually they sold a lot of their best players that
Yeah.
year that they got relegated. Now, you take most of someone's best players off them, like it's going to struggle. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing we've got to say about Regis Lebris is he's managing a football club that will at some point sell their best players, because they are trying to make sure they've got the sustainable model, which, given kind of the mess that you were in previously, you can totally understand that approach. But what a start, man. And we also have to remember, one of those games that you've won was against Burnley, who, I think otherwise, I didn't see their result at the weekend. I'm assuming they probably won. But that they're going to be certainly there or thereabouts a promotion. So look, I think fair play to you, and let's see when this run's going to end. We've got an international break at least, so we'll see how he's return after that. Right, let's talk about Newcastle. So I ended up scoring a late notice ticket to the match
Yeah.
for Sunday, so I managed to go, which wasn't the original plan. The original plan is I was going to watch it in the house, and try and keep me kids quiet, and I didn't have to worry about any of that. Thankfully, I was able to drop the kids off at my mum's and go to the game with me 2 nephews, and the result's great. Really happy with the result. Can't complain about that. 2-1 win at home to Spurs. We were definitely not the better side for about 70-75 minutes of that game. Anth, what's more important? Is it a good performance? Is it 3 points? I mean, what's more important?
In an ideal world, you want both, don't you? But it's again back to Mr. Alan Shearer, incognito, missing in action, Chuck Norris style, on the 7:30 p.m. train from King's Cross to Newcastle. He did say that he acknowledged the fact that winning, says he, when you're not at your best, is a good sign for any side. But you obviously want the performance to go with it. Now, like you said there, I mean, you were second best for long periods of time. I did watch the match as well. I mean, Barnes's finish was exquisite, and Isak was just ice cold as always. But again, another own goal as well. Quite a few own goals, of course, of the weekend with the 2 top teams in the northeast. I don't know how that other team from East Yorkshire got on, Cornwall, wherever they're from again. Sorry about that. But yeah, you want both, but I would quite happily just muddle on through and get a dull 1-0 if it meant we're climbing up the league, because you're 5th in the Premier League on 7 points. It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. I mean, obviously you'll have you know what's going on behind the scenes more than I do, and you'll know some of the murmurings and mumblings to your fellow supporters. So I'm sure that you'll enlighten us with some of those. How did you feel watching that, John, on Sunday?
I felt like the result was the most important thing, but I would say that because we won, right? If we play really well and get beat, I do walk away from the ground and I feel better about it. And I think, well, we couldn't have done more. I don't think you could have had any complaints that Spurs won. Now, I don't necessarily think we played badly. I think Spurs were very good. But it was clear that there was a game plan in place, and especially, and I said this on the True Faith Patreon review that we did last night, is sitting in the level 7 in the family enclosure. It's a really good seat to see the full pitch. So what I noticed really early on is that out of possession, we were man to man. So we were literally man marking. So every time, I think it's Vicario who plays in goal for them, he put the ball down as if to play it out. Isak was straight on Basuma, and then the two wingers took a player each as well. So there was a clear plan there to try and restrict how Spurs played through. Now the other thing that I noticed is the move that for Isak's goal, where Joe Linton collects it, plays the ball, whatever else, movement, turns the man, and then plays this brilliant pass through. It was very, very deliberate, and you could see the pieces moving. You could see how the Spurs players were getting dragged, and somebody somewhere had worked out, right, this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to get with chances to score. And we tried it a couple of times before, and it hadn't worked. And we tried it the third time, we got the goal. And then we tried it again 3 minutes later. And what Eddie Howe's able to do is work out, if the game isn't going his way, how can I still put ourselves in a chance where we can win this game? And it just reminds you of, people have given him a lot of stick because, he was playing Dan Burn at left back last year, and Sean Longstaff still gets a start, and Jacob Murphy still gets a start, and all that. Now, some of that stuff isn't his fault because, and we're going to get onto that in a minute, I'm sure. But I think you've got to take what you've got and do the best that you can with it. And I can't see any other manager in the country that could do a better job of that for Newcastle. I repeat, that as I've done many times before, when he came to St James's for the first time, when he came to Newcastle United, like, we were as good as relegated. And, yes, there was only I think it was 14 games or whatever, but we were as good as down at that stage. We had 7 points from 14 games, and we were an absolutely hopeless outfit as a side. We managed to finish 11th, 1 point off the top 10 at the end of that season. For me, that was a miracle. What he did the following year to get a club that was starting the likes of Dan Burn and Sean Longstaff and Jacob Murphy to finish in the top 4. And then last year, with the worst injury crisis known to man, we ended up, I think we went the whole of December playing, and we only had 13 or 14 players fit, in terms of the senior team. But we managed to kind of play our way through that and just missed out on Europe. First time in 10 years, the team finishing 7th in the league doesn't qualify for Europe. So, look, you can say a lot of things about kind of how things go for Newcastle at the minute, but Eddie Howe finds a way to get the results when it matters. So I look at it and I say we're in the next round of the League Cup as well, because we've got to mention that as well. And actually, I was on the free True Faith podcast. Honestly, I'm not plugging them all the time. I don't mean to. They don't need the plugs, trust me. But I was on that podcast midweek. We watched the game of the Centurion, and I felt like we were probably the better side for most of the game. I think on balance, we deserved to go through. We just, and I know we got the penalties, but we did what we needed to do at that stage. But there was a lot of talk about kind of how we were really hopeless all game, and I just don't think that's the same game I watched. Thought maybe a 20, 30-minute spell in the middle at the end of the first half, start of the second, we weren't great. But I think the rest of it, I think we looked the better side by far, and on balance of play, we deserved to win. Did you watch that, Anth, as well?
I did, yes, and I tend to agree with you there. I mean, the the final penalty by the Notts Forest player. I mean, I think it's still orbiting planet Pluto, isn't it? I'm sure it flew past my house on a couple of occasions as well that night. But deservedly so. And you know what price to win that cup? It's achievable. It is achievable. And you know what? You're still in it. And as you said, with regards to Eddie Howe, he's getting the best out of players who certain supporters would say are not worthy of playing for the club, but he's getting the best out of them. And you know, if you look at previous regimes who've had the same players, maybe they haven't got that little bit of extra out of them. So you've got to give him credit for that, as you've said.
And I also, just for the record, Dan Burn, Emil Kraft, sensational yesterday. Not yesterday, on oh yeah, it was yesterday.
Yep.
They were absolutely incredible at the back. Dan Burn, yes, he's got the own goal against his name. I don't think he could have done much to stop the ball going in. He had one hospital pass across the 18-yard box, which actually I think Kraft managed to sort. That's the only mistake he made all game. And you know, Sean Longstaff had a really good game as well. So, and these are all players that people say, oh, you know, they're not good enough and they need to move on. And you know, yeah, we all want to see the team improve, right? And I'm not sitting here saying the team doesn't need to improve, because it does, right? We need stronger players in that squad if we want to be, as Yasser Al-Rumayyan said on Amazon, #1. Then absolutely, there's areas that are very clear that need to be strengthened, right? But these players can still do a very good job for Newcastle while they're here. And while they're here, and while the transfer window is shut, it's really important that we just focus on supporting the lads. And ultimately, you know, we got the result. Sandro came back, looked, you know, brilliant again. You look great against Forest for an hour. You look great for the last 20, 25 minutes. He's strong, but he's classy. You know, like, he's just, what a player he's going to be for us. He's going to be so important. Anth, transfer window fallout. Talk to me about Sunderland first, and then I'll have him rant about Newcastle.
Oof, I bet you will and all. I can't wait for that. It was an interesting one. I mean, it went with regards to the striker situation. I mean, I went to bed and I was thinking, I don't think we'd signed anyone up until that point, or it hadn't been advertised anyway. I stuck with Sky Sports News till the end. But there were some interesting ones. There were some very interesting ones. I mean, Pierre Ekwa, I think he'll be a miss. I mean, he wasn't consistent enough. I mean, we got him from, it was at the West Ham Academy. He's done really well for us. He's well liked at the club. He's a very, very positive, upbeat character. And you know, when he was on it, he was on it. He was absolutely superb. But he's gone on. Well, he's gone on a season-long loan deal at Saint Etienne with an option to buy, I think, in the region of £6 million. So he'll be a miss, I think, in the changing room. But on the pitch, I think we've got enough now. So that's my opinion, anyway. One of the most interesting ones was Louis Hamir, which I was very, very surprised about, because he's gone to a season-long loan to Juventus, and I'm like, what? So he's gone on a season-long loan to Juventus, and apparently he's going to be part of the Juventus Next Gen team, which is the equivalent to playing the third tier of Italian football. Bizarre, absolutely bizarre. I think the potential has always been there, and he showed pre-season with that wonderful strike that, you know, he can, when he looks interested and he gives enough effort and puts a shift in, then he can do it. But yeah, that was a really bizarre one, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out, because I saw the press shots of him when he actually went and he signed and he's got the shirt and all that, and he looks far happier there than he ever did at our place. So that's a really interesting one. Timothy Pembele has gone out on loan to League One side Le Havre, which wasn't a surprise. Did I get the pronunciation right? I hope so.
Did. Yeah, that was good.
Nectarius Triantis has gone on loan again to Hibernian, which was no surprise. He played really well yesterday, apparently. And I've got the list of players that were signed, because I'm going to try and get some of the names correct. But one of the good signings, I think, and a very shrewd sign, again, like Brown, was Chris Mepham. Now, AJ Elise is out. Apparently, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. And I think I think Chris Mepham could be a very shrewd sign, a very good player, proven player. And he had a lot of interest from other championship clubs. We got him. So I think we'll wait and see after the international break if he gets in the first team, which I'm sure he will. And Ahmed Abdullahi, 20-year-old Nigerian forward. We've signed him for an undisclosed fee, but they reckon it's around 1.7 million from Ghent. think he's one for the future. But I mean, I think we maybe needed someone with a bit more experience and a proven track record. But we'll see what happens with that. And then Milan Alexic, 19-year-old. I can't even pronounce the team he's come from, but apparently we've spent close to £3.1 million for him. Apparently he's an in-demand midfielder. A lot of big European clubs interested in him. And finally, this could be another fantastic signing, a very shrewd signing again. Salih Abdul Samed. Now, he signed from, where's he signed from? He signed from, where's he signed from? RC Lens. And he's got Champions League experience. And, he could be a great signing for us. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these fit in the current, because the current squad are just flying at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see. So I was panicking towards the end, but I think it's been quite a decent end of, sort of this transfer window, end of transfer window for us. Very interesting. As for yourselves, though,
I'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah, I bet you will.
I think Chris Mepham. Yeah, I think you're right. Experience. We've been talking about. You can't just get promoted with kids. You need some experience in there, and Chris Mepham will add that to your squad. So yeah, very shrewd. I think the lad who's gone to Juventus obviously likes black and white stripes. So maybe that's why he looks happier. Sorry. And no, but I think, look, I think again it goes back to the club being United, and I think the manager accepts that he's there to be the head coach, and he's quite happy to assume that role. And I don't know how much of a say he's had in recruitment, but if he hasn't had any say, but he's happy with that, that is probably more a continental model. And I think he's just accepting, and he'll try and get the best out of his players. And at the minute, he's getting the best out of his players. So, I don't think anyone can complain. Right, Newcastle United's transfer window. So we signed. If I just go through, these are the players that we signed through the window. So we signed Odysseus Vlachodimos from Nottingham Forest on a 20 million deal. Obviously we won't mention the fact that Elliot Anderson went the other way for 35 million, and the fact that this is definitely not a PSR dodge, but it blatantly is a PSR dodge. We signed John Ruddy, I think, on a free to bolster the goalkeeping department, because that's just what we needed, another goalkeeper. We signed Lloyd Kelly on a free, who I think is going to be a really good signing. He's played left back the last 2 league games for us. Probably didn't do amazingly against Bournemouth, but I thought he was pretty solid yesterday against Spurs. And the other thing with Kelly, what Kelly has that Burn doesn't have, is he's got that ability to go up and down the line. And he's a little bit more defensively sound than Lewis Hall. I really like Lewis Hall, but he's definitely still got a little bit more work to do defensively. We signed Lewis Hall permanently. So that was always going to happen, I think, just generally. And have I missed someone? Is that everyone?
I think it might be, is it?
Trying to think, yeah. Kelly, Hall, the 2 goalkeepers. But that tells you kind of what this window's been like. Because I'm sat here thinking, surely we signed someone else. And I'm fairly sure we haven't. And I think that tells you a lot about kind of where we are as a club, because yes, we've got Sandro Tonali coming back, like a new signing. Got Harvey Barnes, who didn't play much last year, like a new signing, right? We spent 4 weeks trying to beg Crystal Palace to accept a fee for Mark Gahey, basically. And I feel like Palace played us like kippers. I do think they've made a mistake, because they're not getting that money in even 4 months' time for Mark Gahey. They're not getting 65 million from then, or 70 million, whatever it is that they wanted. I think at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle went up and said, look, there's 50 million on the table here. The offer's there. Take it or leave it. And we try and do something in January. Though January is not always a great time to do business. He's got 18 months left on his deal. And if he wants to come to Newcastle, obviously the longer that goes, the better. And then you've got the fact that we haven't strengthened on the right wing. The 2 biggest gaps that we've had for the last 3 windows, right centre half, right winger. Now, you could argue possibly that the start of last season, Anthony Gordon, we didn't know whether that he was going to be as good as he was, but I think there was a feeling that he'd had a really good, under 21 Euros, and then he only took a week off, and then he went straight into pre-season, and he was really sharp for the start of the year. But there's a massive drop off on that right wing side when you look at Barnes, Gordon, Isak, Wilson, and then you've got Murphy and Almiron. And again, it goes back to, I'm not trying to dig out Murphy and Almiron and say that they're not good players. They're just not at the same level as Gordon and Isak. Now, not many players are, but there is, for me, there's too much of a drop off there, which is why I think you saw Harvey Barnes start on the left hand side and Gordon on the right at the weekend. The right centre half debate. I mean, clearly, Fabian Schär has been a fantastic servant for us. I don't doubt that. But we need to kind of, look for the future really and see what we do, because he's got 1 year left on his deal. It's the wrong side of 30. And the biggest issue we've got, I think, well, there's two things. First of all, if we go for a player like we went for Gahey, you have to get him. You can't have this saga going on and on for weeks and weeks to not get him or someone else. And there were certainly other players that we were looking at in that position that we didn't sign. That's the first issue. The second issue is that we are shit at selling players. Like honestly, I've in all my time supporting the club. Now, I never thought this would be something I'd complain about. Is I was there in the Mike Ashley years, and it was like, oh yeah, great, we can sell Andy Carroll for 35 million. We can sell Demba Ba for 7 million on his release clause, what have you. Sold Perez for 30 million, which you talk about some of these deals, great business. Probably the worst deal we ever did was selling James Milner for about 10 or 12 million to Aston Villa. That's probably the worst one that we ever did. Apart from that, every other player that we sold probably didn't do better when they left Newcastle. Now, the issue we've got is we've got players like, I think everyone felt Callum Wilson was at a natural juncture to go, still at the club. He got an injury in pre-season, but, still at the club. There's a lot of talk about Kieran Trippier, about what's going to happen with him, whether he's going to go. For the record, I really do hope he stays, because I think he's better than Livramento when he's played. Though Livramento's getting the game ahead of him. But, but that's an issue. Almiron, we should have tried to sell him last summer, because that's when he was at his peak. He had his purple patch, a bit like what Bournemouth have done with Solanke. He's had one really good season. Someone's come in and said he has 65 million, and they've gone, brilliant, we'll take that. One good year, cash out. And I just think we really need to, as a club, if we're going to be successful in this PSR age, we need to get better at selling some of these players. And I'm not going to call those players deadwood, because they're not. They will, if they're in and around the squad, they will have a significant contribution to the success of Newcastle United this season. The deadwood is hard, right? How do you get rid of Isaac Hayden? Who wants him? Ryan Fraser had to terminate his contract. There are players there that are still at the club, and you're like they're nowhere near. Jamal Lewis is going to go in the next day or two to Sao Paulo, I think he's signing for. So look, there is some deadwood there that we've struggled to shift. But the other thing we have to remember is that the old regime signed some of these players on really lucrative contracts, really average players on good money that they're not going to get elsewhere. Look at, how do you get rid of those players? It's difficult. So there is a slight hangover from the Ashley era, but I certainly think there's stuff that the club could have done better. I can't blame Paul Mitchell, because he's come in the middle of the window. You can't say that all the blame is at his door. He will have some sort of contribution, no doubt, but it's far too much to kind of just lay it all at him now. He's just got in the door. Give him a chance. Darren Eales, however, I think you can level a hell of a lot of blame at him. He's at the top of the club, and he shouldn't. He basically said, "No, can't have." The rumor is, it's been reported that basically Eales turned around to PIF and said, "I can't do the job I want to do whilst Amanda and Murd out of here, because they're still getting too involved." And they said, "Well, actually, if we're going to be here, we're going to be involved. So actually, it's better that we go. Buy us out." And that's that's how they feel it went. Now, I like hearing that. I think that doesn't surprise me. And I think if you look at Staveley's statement, she said something about letting them get on with the job. Now, for him to do that, make that move, for them to go, and then to have the window we had, unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Can't happen. So I think Eddie Howe's been left short. Is it really fair to say Champions League's an expectation if you haven't strengthened those areas? I don't think so.
Do you think that it will still be the expectation? That's the question, isn't it? It's a case of, I look back at Sunderland's past with regards to our recruitment process and some of the horror stories that I could tell. I mean, yeah, and Dong, your Rodwell, etc., who again won lucrative contract who wouldn't budge, but even worse, didn't have the heart or the courage to play for us, as in when things were bad. I mean, it takes a brave soul to step out on a pitch at the stadium like St James's Park when everything's going against you and put up with whatever abuse. So, and they just didn't have it. So, and they won lucrative contracts as well. And it took us, honestly, it was just awful. The best thing, I mean, Speakman's had his critics as well. And, I was probably one of them with regards to the striker situation you mentioned earlier on about, the two positions that have needed filling for a number of seasons at St James's Park. The striker position's been maybe 2, possibly 3 seasons, but we
When
signed
did you
young
lose
players.
Ross Stewart?
Oh yeah, there you go from that point onwards. I mean, there's a prime example of sell a player when yes, he was injured, etc. But as how many minutes he's played at Southampton up to now, and we earned a pretty penny off him, didn't we? So again, when you're on about Almiron, the purple patch he had, some of the goals he was scoring. I know he's like a cult hero and he's a fan favorite and what have you, but will he ever be bandied around for that sort of transfer fee figure again? Possibly not. Same with Gahey. It's really difficult. I mean, more so in the Premier League with obviously, all the figures have got add up now, haven't they? So for us down in the Championship, it's maybe, I'm not going to say easy, but a little bit simpler. So yeah, I mean, I know Alan Shearer, as I mentioned earlier, wasn't happy with the lack of signings that he's, and the Gahey thing could have been like a big marquee signing for you. Fair enough, not in the striker position where they get all the glory and all the plaudits and headlines and what have you, but it would have been a really good statement signature. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Crystal Palace will ever get that figure sort of offered again from. So I can understand your frustration there, John, totally.
Look, we are where we are now, though, right?
Yep.
And I said it before. In the next round of the League Cup, 7 points from 9. We'll play Wimbledon away in the next round of the League Cup. Really good opportunity to progress into that competition. That if we win that game, that puts us into the last 8. No, 16. Last 16. If we win that, yeah. So look, I think when you look at it from that point of view, we're in a position. However, the chances that we then draw a big 6 or big 7 side, whatever you want to call them, is increased because they've effectively seeded the Champions League and Europa League teams in that draw. So, rather than just making the decision I think they should do and just remove teams that are in Europe from that competition because they don't want to be in that competition, like just take them out. And and then you'll have a different winner of that cup every year. You'll have a different team in Europe every year. That would make a massive difference. Not that I think the Football League are listening to me or care about my opinion. Yeah, I think we've talked about the transfer window enough. But at one point, Miguel Almiron, I wouldn't say he's a fan favorite.
Really? Oh, right.
Yeah, and he's. But I think it goes back to the point I made about he's just not as good as the others that are there. So the frustrations are there more. Now we're a more successful side. There's less room for people not quite being at the level. And that's the reason. But look, he's given a hell of a lot to this club. I've got a lot of time for him, and I've told you the story about the Chinese he paid for. So
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to ask you this, Anth. 4 games played in the league, 4 wins in the league, goal difference of +9, 1 goal conceded, which was an own goal. What's a realistic finishing spot, given the respective start and given the transfer activity?
End of season. We talked about it at the beginning of the season, didn't we? And I was a bit unsure, but I was thinking if we can hit the ground running. Labrie was a bit of an unknown quantity. Obviously, he had his reputation coming over from France, the relegated team sort of reputation. I read into it and I did my research and I thought he cannot be held totally responsible for that because he had some mercenary players as well as players leaving the club he managed. So I did say sixth if we could string a good number of results together and we hit the ground running. And there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and I don't think you should ever straddle across it in any walk of life, never mind in football. But I just think, for example, Poveda had a cheeky dig at Portsmouth, referencing their history as a maritime heritage site and historic dockyard by saying, happy to have finally made my return and get my first minutes. No better feeling than sinking ships down south. And I thought, whoa, lad, rein it in a bit, right? I like a bit of banter, like a bit of, back and forth and what have you, but we just need to keep our feet firmly on the ground. So I'm not going to get too carried away, even though we've won 4 on the bounce and we've got a fantastic record, because the nights are drawn in now. It's going to get colder. Once winter comes around, once that Christmas fixture list and the new year, that congestion and, a lot of good teams fall by the wayside, that'll be a big test. But I'm still going to stick at sixth. I'm going to stick
Okay.
at sixth. Yeah, I did say sixth. Yeah, but my heart was saying sixth, but my head was saying maybe seventh. I think I said, or eighth. So, but I'm going to go for
Eighth,
sixth.
yeah.
I'm going to go for six now. I'm going to go for sixth. That final playoff spot.
Okay. I think it's you don't start playing midweek games till October. I had a bit of a sneaky look at the fixture list because there's this the way that it's marketed is, oh well, championship, you play Tuesday, Sunday, Tuesday, Saturday constantly, and it doesn't actually kick in till
Yeah.
October. So I think if you get to the end of September and you still, you have another couple of wins under your belt, then you're going to be in a really, really strong position going into that congested bit, because I think that's the bit that I worry about for you, is because of the way that you play.
Yeah.
Because, being a football fan of a team that like to play a high press, high intensity, that intensity is meant to be our identity. I'm not sure if it is at the moment, but that's what it's meant to be. The multiple games is what kills it, and that's where the injuries come and everything else. So let's see. I think you're right. I think Christmas is probably the right gauge to say how well is it going and what's happening. Same question for me about Newcastle.
Yeah.
I think I've got to say that if we finish in a European spot, it's been a very good season for us, based on what we haven't done in the summer. I understand we could still do stuff in January, and that might make a difference. I understand that we're not playing in Europe, and that will help us. And we have started really well. We've got, as I say, 7 points out of 9, which I think we all would have taken at this stage as Newcastle fans. And I'd much rather, I said this to the boys yesterday, I'd much rather take 3 points off Spurs and take 3 points off Bournemouth. So if I had to choose a game to win, it would have been the Spurs game. So I'll take that. But I think that if we finish only in a Europa League spot, and I say only, we should be pleased with that. But if we finish only in a Europa spot, and we're not playing Champions League football next year, I think we definitely lose either Isak or Gordon or Bruno. And I don't think you can argue with that. Those players have not been sold the dream of the Europa League. They've not been sold the dream of the Europa Conference League. They certainly haven't been sold a dream of no European football at all. I think you can get away with 1 season. I don't think you can get away with 2. And this is the reason why, when you were talking about what's an realistic expectation for the club, I don't think it's about what's realistic for the club. It's about what's necessary. If you want to continue to build and continue to challenge, we need to finish in the Champions League spot this year. So I think we need European teams to do very well in European competition. If that happens, there'll be a 5th place for the Champions League. And I think we have to do everything we can to finish in that top 5. But I think realistically, given the way that the transfer window's gone, I think Europe would be a very good season. Obviously, winning a trophy I'd be over the moon with that. And I would still want to win a trophy over qualifying for the Champions League. But that's the legacy fan in me. absolutely tattooed in. And thank you very much again for joining me, as you always do. I will remind our listeners that we are sponsored by Mama Lane Crafts. So again, please check out their website, check out their socials, check out their Etsy shop. If you mention Northeast Divide, there's a 10% discount on your personalizable goods that you can order through them. If you've liked the video, please like it. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please rate it. Please leave us comments on our YouTube. Leave us comments on your app, and please leave us comments and interact with our socials. And we'll be back next week for another episode, obviously as part of the international break. Thank you very much, and goodbye.